Multiple intelligence theory is not equal to learning styles. So you've probably heard about learning styles, especially if you've been either a teacher or a student within the past 30 years. It has become a prevalent idea that has garnered equal parts praise and criticism. Here we're going to examine the misconceptions about learning styles and how they relate to Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. Because learning styles are such a common notion, you probably have some idea already about its various modes, and you may even personally identify as being a particular type of learner. Yet we often get confused about the idea. How many types of learning are there? A quick Google search of number of learning styles will yield multiple answers. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12. What's going on here? Well, to answer that, we need to dive into some psychological history. We can begin with Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, which was popularized by his book Frames of Mind in 1983. His definition of intelligence states, intelligence is a biopsychological potential to process information that can be activated in a cultural setting to solve problems or create products that are of value in a culture. The 8 intelligences he presents are linguistic, logical mathematical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist intelligence. The weight of his theory rests on 8 criteria. Each intelligence demonstrates a strong basis for many, if not all, of the following criteria. 1. Identifiable cerebral systems. 2. Evolutionary history and plausibility. 3. A core set of operations. 4. Meaning encoded in a symbol system. 5. A distinct developmental history and mastery. 6. Examples of savants, prodigies, and exceptional people. 7. Evidence from experimental psychology. And 8. Psychometric findings. Criteria 1 and 2 are derived from biology, 3 and 4 from logical analysis, 5 and 6 from developmental psychology, and 7 and 8 from traditional psychology. There are 2 key implications derived from this theory. 1. That everyone has the capacity to develop their multiple intelligences, and 2. Everyone has a distinct cognitive profile. This is true even in cases of identical twins, because although they will have similar cognitive profiles, they will not be identical due to unique experiences. Criticisms of MI, or multiple intelligence theory. 1. A lack of operational definitions. Because this area is a bit vague in Gardner's propositions, it's difficult to effectively assess or compare competencies. And 2, implied educational use. So vague guidelines were originally provided, and Gardner kind of distances himself from the practice end of how to apply MI theory. And 3, that the theory competes with G theory. Is it inclusive or exclusive with the theory of general intelligence? In this aspect, it was a little bit unclear for critics. And 4, weak evidence for practical applications. So if it's difficult to assess and compare competencies, then how do you build a case of evidence and how you apply it? So if it can't be used for education and can't be tested, is it useful? And so that is a problem with MI theory. In support of MI theory, 1, that there's a neurological basis. MI theory was grounded in neurological scans, and this has been substantiated by current neurological science. 2, limited educational claims. Gardner has distanced the theory from educational implementation, but there's still evidence for its success. So while these are 2 distinct different things, education and the theory itself, there has been shown successful implementations of MI theory. 3, inclusive with G theory. So Gardner has specified that MI theory is compatible with G theory, as well as other theories of intelligence. It kind of sits as a layer on top of other theories. 4. That MI theory has provided a lasting framework, and this refines overall understandings of complex cognitive function and ability. So when MI theory came out, educators loved it because it affirmed what they saw in the classrooms and it helped them to build a defense against the push for standardized testing and one-size-fits-all teaching approaches. There's also something universally appealing in the idea that we are all unique, and the scientific theory that supported this notion of ourselves was ripe for confirmation bias. Those that misunderstood the science eagerly took the theory beyond the boundaries of its claims. What arose soon after were learning styles, and just like theories of intelligence, there are multiple models for learning styles. We don't have time to cover them all, but I will highlight one of the most prevalent, which arose soon after Gardner's theory in 1987. Neil Fleming presented the VARK model, corresponding to visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic types of learners. Note how some of these styles mirror Gardner's intelligences, but with several omissions. Whether these models are intertwined is a different debate, but here we can highlight where the confusion began to occur amongst educators and neophyte psychologists. In relation to MI theory, learning style is meant only to refer to a preferred approach, but not necessarily one in which someone is more apt. So criticisms of learning style, number one, the lack of scientific rigor, that it's been widely accepted without strong empirical evidence. 2, that it's misappropriated science, that the acceptance of learning styles undermines critical integrity of education and the scientific method. So if education is adopting this learning style strategy, but without evidence that it's effective, that introduces a conflict of purpose, really, with education. 3, that it's a waste of educational resources. So again, if it's shown to be ineffective, then it's illogical to continue using the model of learning styles. And 4, detrimental effects. By labeling learners, it could mislead them into thinking that they are incapable or provide excuses for their failure. In support of learning styles, 1, that it went beyond IQ. And this was kind of together with MI theory, but both broaden the appreciation for competencies beyond logic and linguistics, which was traditionally associated with IQ and being quote-unquote intelligent. And 2, student-centered education. This brought focus to the unique needs of individual students. 3, multimodal education. It's promoted use of multiple modalities and sparking innovation in different types of arts and interactive types of experiences that use more than one modality. And 4, 76% or more of educators are wrong, and this could be as high as 90%. So despite the lack of evidence, is this really just a big case of confirmation bias, or is there something else leading people to really believe in this theory of learning styles or this model of learning styles and applying it in the classroom? In regard to learning styles, Howard Gardner had this to say in an article featured in the Washington Post in 2013. He says, "When researchers have tried to identify learning styles, teach consistently with those styles, and examine outcomes, there is not persuasive evidence that the learning style analysis produces more effective outcomes than a one-size-fits-all approach. Of course, the learning style analysis might have been inadequate, or even if it is on the mark, the fact that one intervention does not work does not mean that the concept of learning styles is fatally flawed. Another intervention might have proved effective. Absence of evidence does not prove non-existence of a phenomenon. It signals to educational researchers back to the drawing boards." Confusion persists. There's conflated meaning. Learning styles were confused with multiple intelligences back in 1983, and they still are. These terms are used almost interchangeably by most people. Continued distortion. Learning styles continue to be taught throughout education, and the idea is further distorted by conflating various learning theories and frameworks. Just this year, I completed a learning strategies class at Franklin that continued to extol the values of learning styles, and that was blurred with multiple frameworks with little connection sewn between them. So this is something that is still occurring regularly, and that it's institutionalized. Learning styles are a required knowledge component for the majority of state licensure exams for teachers. A 2016 study by the National Center on Teacher Quality found that 67% of teacher preparation programs required students to incorporate learning styles into lesson planning assignments. So, learning styles as a whole is still an active part of education, but it's conflated with previous meanings of multiple intelligences. Researcher Yuki Terada sums up the dilemma nicely, stating, "The big mistake in popular culture and in our educational system, the theory of multiple intelligences has too often been conflated with learning styles, reducing Gardner's premise of a multifaceted system back to a single preferred intelligence. Students are visual or auditory learners, for example, but never both. We've stumbled into the same old trap. We've simply traded one intelligence for another." So Gardner was originally trying to move away from the limited aspects of G theory, but he arrived in a place providing a way for multiple intelligences, but it's been received and interpreted in a way that, oh, we're all just one type of intelligence. Oh, I'm a visual learner or an auditory learner. But really, Gardner is arguing that we're all of these things. So realities. Intelligence is multiple in nature. And here I have an example that spoken language is linguistic, but it also has musical and auditory aspects. Neuropsychologist Branton Shearer agrees with Gardner's position, stating that intelligences are relatively independent, and the effective performance of all real-world tasks requires an amalgam of intelligences working in concert. So everything in our complex brains is working simultaneously to complete complex tasks such as reading or speaking. It can't be boiled down to one singular type of mode. And intelligence theories are incomplete. There are no fully realized theories of intelligence. Each theory is incomplete, and we must be careful not to misapply partial understandings. This bridge image is from neuropsychologist Branton Shearer, and it demonstrates kind of where multiple intelligences sits within these kind of bulwarks of cognitive psychology and education and the emerging sciences of neuroscience and neurolearning. So it's something that holds everything together, and it's also creating this enhanced cognitive understanding. But in reality, it probably looks a bit like this. It's a work in progress. So in conclusion, do incorporate pluralism or multiple ways to interact with new information. This includes the arts and other forms into learning and expression. Pluralistic approaches have shown strong evidence for improving the learning process. Do individualize content by considering the best mode for both the content and the audience. Do think critically about all information you're presented with and understand the limits of incomplete scientific theories. And do base practices on more evidence-based strategies and less on theory. Don't label learners with a particular type of intelligence. Don't try to match content to a perceived learning style. Don't confuse multiple intelligences with learning styles. And don't use the term style. And that's advice straight from Gardner.